Chapter 21. After the meeting in the sheriff's office, Ian seemed even more intent on keeping Nika busy with her project, or with jobs at the center. Maybe he was trying to get her used to life without the growing black pup. A routine developed. Each morning after she fed Khan, she had to meet Ian in front of the cabin for their ride to town. Volunteers were spending more and more time with the pup. Ian thought it was important for Khan to accept care from a variety of people. In Nika's opinion, too many people. Khan was slipping away from her. Ian was still pretty mad about Bristow's, and now everyone in town would know that she had been ordered to do community service in restitution for vandalism. When she arrived at Ian's cabin on Tuesday morning, he was still inside. She knocked and peeked in. He was at his laptop writing. "Come on in," he said. She opened the door and stepped inside. It had been almost a week and she still hadn't brought up number 5 from Ian's list. She wanted things to settle down a bit after their visit with the sheriff. "Looks like Friday will be moving day," Ian said. "Just a sec, I have to finish this. Did you eat?" "Pearl sent these." She unwrapped 2 blueberry muffins from a napkin and looked around for a plate to put them on, or at least a paper towel. "Do you have any dishes? I'll get something." "Frills," he said, picking up a muffin. "Looks delicious. Thanks." She guessed after being a bachelor so long, he'd developed casual habits. He took a bite and looked back at his computer screen, where columns of numbers trooped across the page. Plans for the center, budgets for buildings and enclosures and whatnot. Not my favorite chore. Nika looked around. His cabin was messy with packs, books, radio parts, reports, and tools scattered across every surface. In the food area, a single jar of trail mix rested on a stack of books. CDs were stacked in uneven piles beside the CD player. Old blues, Scott Joplin, classical. 2 guitars hung from pegs on the wall. His clothes were neatly folded on the unpainted wood shelves of an open closet in the corner. A small couch with leaf print fabric sat by itself on a bright red and orange foreign-looking rug in the center of the room. In one corner was a bed. Against the back wall was a pot-bellied wood stove with curvy legs crouched on a platform of bricks. With its almost human shape, it seemed like it should have a name, like Gertrude. Nika was avoiding the subject that was festering. She picked a piece of muffin off the front of her shirt. She wanted to say something, but her words vaporized. Her face must have shown how she stopped herself from speaking. "What's up?" Ian asked. He stacked his papers, packed his computer in a case, and gathered his socks and boots. She plopped down on the small couch and ran her hand over the faded green fabric. "Well, okay." She shrugged and tried to force a smile, but it stiffened up. "So why can't I ever be with Khan again, after he's with Luna?" Ian walked slowly over to the couch, dropped his boots onto the floor, and sat next to her. They were both silent. Then he shifted to face her. We all have to have rabies shots to be with the animals after they are at the center. Then we don't know about Luna yet. Socialized wolves can be more dangerous than wild wolves. But you never told me I couldn't be with Khan. In the big pen. I only know because I found your list at the center." Her voice got very quiet. "It's like I don't matter." "Of course you matter. And I'm sorry if you think..." Ian put his head back and took a deep breath. "I never should have done this. Let you help raise the pup." It was as though he were talking to himself. "I thought it would be a way for us to work together, to get to know each other. It was a mistake. I didn't realize that the pup might..." Anger brought her to her feet, and she turned to face him. "That I might love him and want to keep him? Is that what you mean?" What did he expect when he'd handed her a helpless pup and asked her to hold it close? "Look, Nika, you haven't made this easy." He stood up and paced barefoot. "First, you decided to take Khan without a leash, knowing I wouldn't approve. I just wanted him to know what it felt like to be free like a wild wolf. That wasn't your decision to make." "Obviously," she threw back. "And you almost lost Khan. Then I find out you and Thomas released Bristow's animals are in trouble with the sheriff. Again, decided to do something you both know your families wouldn't like. We're doing community service to pay back for that." Ian's face was red. "As if this weren't enough, then you feed a wolf and that wolf gets shot." "Shooting the wolf wasn't because we fed her. She might have died. It was Bristow. Didn't he understand? It was because of them that Luna was alive. You endangered yourselves. You figured she was Bristow's runaway, and you knew the man had shown threatening behavior before. No one should ever feel certain that a wolf is totally safe. Finally, you went there just as a storm was brewing, instead of coming home. None of this shows good judgment. How can I trust you? Ian threw his hands up in a helpless gesture. Well then, maybe you should just send me home if I'm that much trouble. Oh, Nika, Ian said, half groaning and turning toward his desk. Nika charged out the door, slamming it behind her. She felt sick as she ran to the dock. A fight like this was new to her. There had been a girl in her second foster home who liked to hit and seemed to wait for Nika around every corner. Nika had hit her back once, hard. She remembered the sound. It didn't feel good, even though the girl deserved it. But this was different. This felt dangerous. It felt as if, just by getting mad, she could lose everything. That night was still and dry. Nika's sleeplessness became a net for every sound. Loons, the scuffling of small rodents, the short barking call of an owl, the fight with Ian kept rolling over and over in her mind. It was so confusing. There was only one thing that could make her feel better. After Pearl was in bed and Ian had gone down to his cabin on the beach, she collected the old raggedy sleeping bag and followed the moon up the path, not even using a flashlight. The night was cloudless. Inside the pen, as she slid into the bag, she felt a mist of dew settle on the nylon. Khan came to nestle quietly beside her as though agreeing with the need for stealth. His eyes sparkled in the moonlight, and she felt his breath against her arm. Most of the night the wolf slept. Most of the night she didn't. When she woke at dawn, Khan was gone. She didn't want to get up. Maybe if she never crawled out of her sleeping bag into the thin light of the soundless morning, nothing would change. The warmth of Khan beside her at the moon at midnight would never cool, and every morning forever the wolf would greet her like a wave smoothly running to the shore. But then, if she didn't get up, they couldn't have a last run. She'd planned not to run with Khan again because of Ian. But then they had argued, and she'd figured she'd never have an opportunity in her whole life. Just one more time. She pulled herself out of the sleeping bag and slipped out of the gate to visit the outhouse. On her way back, she picked up meat scraps from the fridge. Back in the pen, she put the scraps on a rock and waited. The agile pup, now weighing nearly 42 pounds at 14 weeks old, trotted down to accept his gift. After a quick greeting, Nika opened the gate and Khan lengthened his smooth black shape to bullet down the path. Today, instead of disappearing or playing hide and seek, Khan ran circles around her as they walked. He bumped his head under her hand and once took her hand in his mouth and pulled as if he wanted her to play. She stopped, said no, then pushed him over on his back. Having to be forceful and use both hands, he squirmed, and when he quieted, she rubbed his belly. They went to the rendezvous spot as usual, where they watched the blaze of early sun cut through the trees like stage lights. On the way back, they stopped and searched for any blueberries that might still be ripening on the ridge. Khan picked berries the way he often ate, lying down. He picked delicately with his teeth. This is what I'll remember, Nika thought. I could be a cave girl, or an early Native American girl, or an old woman, and it would be the same. Two creatures together, feeling, freedom, and connection to the plants and rocks and scents surrounding them. Ian had told her that one single underground root system made one huge organism of connected aspen trees, as big as 75 football fields. With Khan, she felt like she was part of something like that. The changing light told her it was time to get back. Ian and Eleanor were probably waiting. Eleanor lured Khan into his old plastic baby kennel with morsels of moose meat. Nika rushed to the pen for the sleeping bag and what was left of the old stuffed bear, then trailed the caravan led by Maki and Ian, carrying the kennel down to the dock. In the boat, she sat on the floor next to the covered kennel and crooned to Khan as they crossed the unwrinkled waters of Anchor Lake. Once they came ashore, she stayed with him again in the back of the pickup until they all crowded into the room-sized holding pen at the center. No one talked much. Eleanor and Maki went back inside, leaving Ian and Nika with a heavy, panting Khan. With his ears back, in worried position, he looked small and scared. Soon Khan panted less and accepted water. Being so focused on the pup, Nika had forgotten all about Luna. Then she heard the whimpers, almost like pup whimpers. Luna was lying with her legs straight out in front of her, facing the rolling gate between the enclosure and the holding pen. Her eyes fixed on Khan's kennel as she emitted a groan, then whimpered again, her jaws dripping as though she had her eye on a tasty treat. Ian had said something about the hormone prolactin and how it made adult wolves feel parental. He nodded and let Khan out of the kennel. The pup curled his body as he rushed over to the fence. Luna growled and Khan turned on his back. Did this mean Luna might hurt Khan? Ian and Eleanor smiled at each other and returned to the center, saying that they all needed to give the wolves some time to adjust. Nika tucked down in the back corner of the holding pen to watch. Later, when the wolves were calmly lying on either side of the fence, Nika got up to go back inside. As she approached the center door, she saw two figures in the window of the office. They were facing each other. She slowed to a stop. Then the two figures came together and kissed. It was Ian and Eleanor. A whirlwind of feeling came over her. She went out the other gate and hurried toward the parking lot, her face burning. She would wait for Ian in the truck. After a while, Ian came through the center doors, looking puzzled. He walked to the passenger side of the truck, where she was slumped in the seat. "Where did you go? We've been waiting." Nika shrugged. "We?" Ian put his hand on the truck door handle, pausing, as though trying to figure out what was going on now. Then, with a no-nonsense look on his face, he opened the door, took her arm, and gently pulled her from the truck. "You've got to see this." He kept his hand on her arm all the way to the building as though she would suddenly bolt down the street, which was possible in the mood she was in. They marched through the office and out the back door, where they stopped by the holding pen. Both wolves were at the fence, but this time Khan was chewing on something between his front feet. Luna stood on the other side of the fence looking down, strings of drool falling from her lips. The object Khan was chewing on was a raw chicken. "Luna gave him a gift," Ian said quietly. She dug a hole under the gate and pushed the chicken into it until Khan could grab and pull it through. "Wow," said Nika. "Are you sure?" "Yup," Ian answered, smiling. Eleanor watched. Luna worked away at it for about 15 minutes. So maybe Khan had found his pack. Nika should be glad for him. Ian was, and because she wasn't entirely, she felt selfish. But in a way, it made her decision easier. The silvery tan wolf wore a pathway in the grass beside the smaller pen. When she gazed at the pup, saliva filled her mouth, and an urge came over her. She wanted the pup to be closer, to taste his breath in her mouth, to run beside him through the trees. And that is the end of chapter 21.